You know Albus Dumbledore, right? You think he is the ultimate flawless paragon of good.
Right, the wizarding world's answer to a benevolent grandfather.
Exactly, a guy who could never do any wrong. But what if I told you there is compelling, mathematically and textually sound evidence that the greatest wizard of all time committed the darkest magic possible?
It's a pretty wild premise.
It is. Welcome to the deep dive. I am incredibly excited today because we are doing something a little bit rebellious. We are essentially breaking the canon of one of the most beloved literary universes of all time.
Yeah, we're looking at the frayed edges of the tapestry, the places where the authorized, pristine version of the story starts to unravel.
I love that. And the material we're diving into today is phenomenal. We're looking at this massive archive of transcripts and theories pioneered by the SuperCarlinBrothers.
Those are fantastic.
They really are. They've spent well over a decade doing this intense, brilliant analysis of the Harry Potter universe. And they didn't just read the books. They treated the text like an active crime scene, just pulling at every single loose thread to see what would happen.
And our mission today is to explore those gray areas with you. We're going to uncover how rigorous logic, textual evidence, and honestly, a healthy dose of basic muggle math can completely upend our understanding of these core characters.
Yeah, basic math ruins everything in fandom. It's great.
It really does. But it's worth establishing a guiding principle for our discussion, which is that knowledge is most valuable when it is understood and applied.
Right.
Engaging with fiction on this deeply analytical level actually exercises our critical thinking in the real world. It forces you, as a reader and a thinker, to ask a really vital question. What happens when the author's original intent collides with what the actual text on the page?
Oh, the death of the author. I absolutely love it. The book says one thing, but the creator says another in an interview years later. Right. Who wins? Today, the text wins. So let's start with that massive hook I threw out there. We're beginning with the ultimate paragon of good, Albus Dumbledore, the man who supposedly abhors dark magic.
Right. He is the moral compass of the entire narrative, the ultimate foil to the dark.
Which makes this theory absolutely staggering. The idea here, and it's backed by an alarming amount of textual evidence, is that Albus Dumbledore created a Horcrux.
Yeah.
And not just an inanimate object either. He made a Horcrux out of his pet phoenix, Fawkes.
To fully grasp the weight of this proposition, we have to isolate the inciting incident of Dumbledore's trauma, the event that fundamentally broke his psyche.
Right. Okay, let's unpack this. Let's push back on the mechanics for a second. Yeah. Because creating a Horcrux isn't a spell you just accidentally sneeze out when you're having a bad day.
Definitely not.
It is the darkest of dark magic. To split your soul, you have to commit the ultimate act of evil. You have to commit murder. So immediately the defense mechanism kicks in. You're like, Dumbledore's the good guy. He didn't kill anyone. But
did he?
Right, did he?
This takes us back to the end of the 19th century, to his youth. Dumbledore is young. He's incredibly ambitious, arguably arrogant.
Oh, highly arrogant.
Yeah. And he is dealing with the immense, suffocating burden of caring for his severely traumatized younger sister, Ariana.
Right.
So he strikes up a very intense relationship with Gellert Grindelwald, a wizard who shares his grandiose ambitions for wizarding dominance.
For the greater good.
Exactly. This toxic mix of ambition and resentment eventually culminates in a horrific, chaotic three-way duel between Albus, his brother Aberforth, and Grindelwald.
And in the middle of this sensory overload, curses flying everywhere in a tiny living room, a stray spell hits Ariana, and she dies.
She dies. And the text explicitly tells us that Dumbledore never knew whose spell actually.
Really? He never knew for sure.
He admits this himself much later in his life. He states that he dreaded beyond all things the knowledge that he might have been the one to strike the fatal blow. He lived in terror of that definitive answer.
Okay, wait, hold on. So if he doesn't know for sure that he cast the killing curse, how could he possibly commit the murder required to split his soul? Don't you have to have the deliberate, malicious intent to murder someone to trigger a Horcrux? Like, you have to know you did it.
Well, that is where we have to look at the psychological mechanics of guilt versus the physical mechanics of magic. The identity of the person who moved their wand and said the incantation actually doesn't matter.
How does the actual murderer not matter for a murder-based magical ritual? That feels like a contradiction.
It's because of how Dumbledore internalizes the event. He believed that his own self-importance, his arrogance, and his deep-seated resentment toward Ariana for slowing down his rise to greatness were the true weapons that killed her.
Oh, wow.
For him, the physical wand movement was completely irrelevant. His neglect, his selfish choices leading up to that exact moment were the psychic equivalent.
So he takes it all on himself.
He took the absolute totality of the blame onto his own shoulders. When he tells Harry years later that regret is his constant companion, he isn't just being poetic.
He means it literally.
He genuinely believed his soul was entirely corrupted by this event. He believed he was evil enough and responsible enough to warrant the fracture of his own soul.
Let me make sure I'm really grasping the mechanics of this, because usually creating a Horcrux is highly intentional. Like, Voldemort wanted to be immortal. He researched the spell, he committed the murder, he deliberately said the incantation to split his soul.
Right.
But this theory implies Dumbledore's soul split almost as a visceral, involuntary reaction to his emotional devastation. Imagine accidentally forging a cursed ring out of pure, unadulterated grief instead of malice.
That's a great way to put it.
You didn't open a dark magic textbook to make a dark artifact, but your sorrow was so unimaginably heavy, so toxic, that it literally crystallized into one.
That is a phenomenal analogy. And if you want textual precedent for magic behaving this way, operating on pure psychological trauma rather than spokentation, we just have to look at the broader lore. It perfectly parallels the concept of an obscurus.
Oh, like from the Fantastic Beasts era of the lore.
Precise. Consider what an obscurus. It's created when a young wizard violently suppresses their magic due to extreme psychological or physical trauma.
Right.
The magic literally separates from their physical self and becomes an independent, dark, parasitic force. The theory suggests Dumbledore, in his darkest, most depressed state following Ariana's funeral, attempted a similar, albeit inverted, magic. He was overwhelmed by a grief so profound it was literally killing him. So he tried to magically extract that overwhelming trauma's body.
So he's essentially trying to magically amputate his own guilt just to survive the psychological pain. And in doing so, he accidentally triggers the process of soul splitting. The trauma was the wedge that cracked the soul, not a dark incantation. And he shoved that fragmented, traumatized, bleeding piece of his soul into a vessel.
And the vessel that presented itself to a young Dumbledore in desperate need was the phoenix, Fawkes.
Which fundamentally recontextualizes his entire relationship with that bird. It isn't just a quirky pet. Let's look at the actual evidence in the text, because once you put these glasses on, it is everywhere.
It really is.
First of all, Dumbledore's extreme reaction to Horcruxes. He bans the subject at Hogwarts. The books are removed from the library. He is fiercely disgusted by them. But he also understands their nuanced mechanics far too well for someone who just read about them in a theory book.
Yeah, the specificity of his language is the key tell here. Let's look at the scene where Harry learns that Voldemort made his snake, Nagini, into a Horcrux. Harry is shocked. He doesn't realize you can use a living animal. Now, observe Dumbledore's response. He calls the practice inadvisable.
Inadvisable. Think about that word choice. He doesn't say it's impossible. He doesn't say it's the most evil thing you could possibly do. He says it's inadvisable.
Yeah.
Take it from me, kid. It's a massive logistical headache. That implies firsthand practical experience. He knows it is a uniquely bad idea to confide a part of your soul to a vessel that can think, move, and act independently.
Exactly.
Because he lived through the consequences of doing exactly that.
And observe how Dumbledore so easily diagnoses Voldemort's relationship with his snake. He notes that Voldemort keeps Nagini unusually close, that he exercises an unusual amount of control over her, and that their bond goes far beyond a master and a familiar.
Because he is projecting. That's exactly what Dumbledore does with Fawkes. The bird just sits on a golden perch by his desk all day, every day for decades.
Yeah, it never leaves.
And Dumbledore can seemingly command Fawkes to do impossible things across vast distances. Which brings us to the climax of the Chamber of Secrets. This specific piece of the theory absolutely blew my mind.
The battle in the chamber, let's analyze the mechanics of that conflict.
Okay, so picture the scene. Harry is trapped deep underground in an ancient secret dungeon. Dumbledore has been suspended from the school. He is miles and miles away in London.
Right.
Harry is alone, facing down a massive basilisk and the memory of Tom Riddle. In a moment of sheer desperation, Harry expresses absolute, unwavering loyalty to Dumbledore. And out of nowhere, teleporting into a sealed subterranean chamber, Fawkes the Phoenix materialized.
Now, the traditional surface-level reading of this scene is that it is a classic deus ex machina. A magical bird of plot convenience swoops in to save the day because the pet is intrinsically linked to the master through the magic of loyalty.
Right. But if you apply this theory, if Fawkes is a Horcrux, if a tangible piece of Albus Dumbledore's soul is actively residing inside that bird, then Harry showing loyalty to Dumbledore is simultaneously showing loyalty to Fawkes, because Fawkes is Dumbledore. And suddenly, this battle completely transformed. It is no longer just a random magic bird pecking at a giant snake while a teenager watches. It is Tom Riddle's diary versus Albus Dumbledore's Phoenix.
It is Horcrux versus Horcrux.
Yes. It elevates the entire sequence from a cool fantasy monster fight into this profound thematic clash of souls. You have the ultimate paragon of good's immortality artifact fighting the ultimate paragon of evil's immortality artifact, locked in combat inside the darkest place in the school. The symmetry is staggering.
And the symmetry extends far beyond that single battle. Let's look at the wands, the twin cord.
Oh, right, the magical connection that drives the entire series.
We learned very early on that Harry's wand and Voldemort's wand share a core. They both contain a single tail feather from the exact same phoenix. And later, the text explicitly reveals that the phoenix who provided those feathers was Fawkes.
Which, when you first read it, just feels like a fun bit of world-building trivia, right? Like, oh, neat, the wands came from the headmaster's cool bird. Small world. But structurally, narratively, it never really mattered where the feathers came from. Just that they were twins, which caused the wands to refuse to fight each other.
Unless you apply this theory. If Fawkes was already housing Dumbledore's Horcrux when he gave those 2 feathers to the wandmaker, Ollivander...
Oh my gosh. Then he didn't just give 2 feathers. He gave 2 microscopic fragments of Dumbledore's soul.
Exact. This conceptually connects the 3 most pivotal characters in the narrative, Harry, Voldemort, and Dumbledore, in a literal soul-deep trinity.
Wow.
Voldemort carries a piece of Dumbledore's soul in his... Harry carries a piece of Dumbledore's soul in his wand. And this shared spiritual architecture explains one of the most hotly debated, confusing scenes in the entire 7 books, the King's Cross Limbo.
Okay, this is where the puzzle pieces violently snap together for me. Okay, so... in the final book, Harry walks into the forest, and Voldemort hits him with a killing curse. But Harry doesn't die.
Right.
He wakes up in a bright, white, ethereal version of King's Cross Station. It's limbo space between life and death.
And let's categorize exactly who and what is present in that limbo.
Well, Harry is there, whole and intact. Then he sees a shivering, flayed, disgusting little baby crying under a bench. We know definitively that this represents the piece of Voldemort's soul that was attached to Harry.
Yes, it's weak, mangled, and trapped there.
Because it was evil and unloved. But then... who walks out of the mist to greet Harry, completely whole and healthy? Albus Dumbledore.
Now, the traditional assumption by millions of readers is that this version of Dumbledore is a hallucination, a comforting manifestation of Harry's subconscious designed to help him process his trauma.
Or like a spirit crossing over.
Right. At best, a spirit crossing over from the afterlife to offer one last wisdom. Harry even explicitly asked the question, is this real or is it happening inside?
And Dumbledore replies with that famous line, "Of course it is happening inside your head, Harry, but why on earth should that mean that it is not real?" Which is a beautiful, deeply poetic line about the power of imagination and perception. But under the lens of this theory, that line becomes deeply, chillingly literal. Dumbledore isn't a vision. He isn't a ghost. He is literally physically there.
Exactly.
His soul fragment, which had been resting inside Harry's wand and bonded to Harry's magical aura for years, is physically present in that limbo space, right alongside Voldemort's soul fragment and Harry's own soul.
It perfectly explains why Dumbledore in that scene is able to impart highly specific, complex information to Harry that Harry could not possibly have known on his own.
Because it's actually him.
It's not just Harry's subconscious working through a logical problem. It is the actual, fully embraced, mature soul fragment of Albus Dumbledore having a real conversation.
It changes everything. It completely reframes Dumbledore. He goes from being this untouchable, god-tier wizard playing chess with people's lives to a deeply flawed, profoundly traumatized human being who made a horrific mistake out of grief in his youth and spent the rest of his exceptionally long life trying to mitigate the damage.
It really grounds the magic in psychology, which is where the best fantasy always operates. The magic is a metaphor for the internal condition.
Yeah.
But, Dumbledore was able to hide this massive secret for decades. This brings up a fascinating point from the research. How do you keep a secret like that in a society this small? Which leads us to our next major area of analysis.
Yes.
Because what happens when we step away from the grand, soulful magic and just apply basic, everyday muggle logic to the world these characters inhabit?
I am so glad we were talking about this because this is where the world-building illusion starts to hilariously break down. Dumbledore's secrets are profound. The logistical secrets of this universe are just baffling. When you apply basic math and economics to the wizarding world, things get weird fast.
Now, we have to acknowledge why this happens. When the first book was written, it was a whimsical children's fable.
Right, logic doesn't matter.
Exactly. In fables, math doesn't matter. A giant can pull a motorcycle out of the sky and you just accept it. But as the series evolved, it transitioned into a grim, complex political thriller. Yeah. And in political thrillers, logistics, demographics, and infrastructure suddenly matter immensely.
Right. You can't have a corrupt ministry of magic dictating educational decrees if we don't understand who the ministry governs.
Yeah.
So let's pull out the calculator and look at the demographics of Hogwarts, because the numbers are staggering. And by staggering, I mean shockingly, incredibly tiny.
Let's run the actual demographics.
Okay, so for those of you listening, we only have Harry's perspective to go on. So let's use his dorm room as the baseline. In his specific dormitory, there are 5 boys: Harry, Ron, Neville, Seamus, and Dean. That's 5. Let's assume an equal gender split for the sake of fairness, so there are also 5 girls in Gryffindor for his year. That is 10 students per house per year. 4 houses means there are 40 students per year in Harry's generation. Across 7 years of magical education, the entire population of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry is roughly 280 students.
A very intimate educational setting, a small private school, essentially.
Exactly. But let's extrapolate that 280 students to the wider economy of magical Britain. The analysts in our source material calculated the tax base required to keep this society afloat.
This is where it gets crazy.
It's nuts. If the average wizarding life expectancy is roughly 78 years and a Hogwarts generation spans 7 years, that means there are about 11.14 generations alive at any given time.
So 11.14 generations multiplied by the 280 students per generation
yields a total local wizarding population of roughly 3,120 people. That's it.
total.
Which raises an immediate massive question about infrastructure and civic funding.
A colossal question. How do 3,100 people subsidize a giant magical Scottish castle? Think about the overhead. We know Hogwarts doesn't charge tuition. They have a full staff of highly specialized professors, a gamekeeper, a caretaker, a dedicated medical staff.
Not to mention the food.
The food. They serve massive, multi-course, all-you-can-eat feasts 3 times a day. The heating bill alone for a grafty stone castle in the Scottish Highlands must be astronomical. Are wizarding taxes just cripplingly high?
Are there massive corporate sponsors we don't know about? Is the Nimbus Broom Company quietly underwriting the potions department to keep the school open?
It highlights a sociological blind spot. When a society is that small, the economy operates more like an isolated rural village in Alaska than a bustling. Yet look at the Ministry of Magic.
Oh, the ministry.
They have a sprawling, labyrinthine bureaucracy. They have specialized multi-level departments for magical sports, for international magical cooperation, for the regulation of magical creatures. If the entire population is only 3,000 people, practically half of the adult population must work for the government.
Right. And suddenly, the Weasley family makes so much more sense. The text treats having 7 kids as this crazy, quirky anomaly, but mathematically, to sustain the population against natural attrition and dark wizard wars, the Weasleys are practically the only ones keeping the wizarding world from complete demographic collapse.
And this lack of logistical foresight extends heavily into their cultural touchstone. Let's examine their primary recreational act.
Oh my gosh. Quidditch. If you are listening to this and you're a massive sports fan, you are going to hate this part because diving into the mechanics of Quidditch was so satisfying because the game design is an absolute nightmare.
It really is.
Think about the schedule alone. Harry's team practices constantly. They're out there 3 evenings a week, in the mud, in the freezing rain, for hours at a time, running complex tactical drill. And how many actual games do they play in a season?
3.
3. They play each of the other 3 houses exactly once. The entire school-wide Quidditch season consists of 6 total games. The practice-to-game ratio completely defines athletic training logic.
Yeah.
You are training 9 months for 3 hours of gameplay.
But the structural flaws of the schedule pale in comparison to the structural flaws of the game itself. Let's talk about competitive integrity.
The equipment. In any professional or even amateur sport, standardization is everything. You have to ensure a level playing field so that skill dictates the winner, not wealth.
Right.
But in Quidditch, players just bring whatever broom they can afford. There is 0 league regulation. Harry is out there riding a Firebolt, an international standard, top-of-the-line racing broom capable of going 0 to 150 miles per hour in seconds, while players on opposing teams are riding ancient, sputtering clean sweeps.
It is a severe socioeconomic disparity manifesting directly as a competitive advantage. The wealth of your family dictates your speed on the pitch.
Exactly. Imagine watching a professional baseball game, but one team is allowed to use unregulated titanium spring-loaded bats because they have a richer sponsor, and the other team is forced to use wet card. It completely invalidates the sport.
Or consider the physical mechanics of the bludgers.
The bludger. They're described as heavy, solid iron balls flying around autonomously trying to violently knock players off their brooms. And the beaters have to hit them away with little wooden bats while flying one-handed.
Yeah, think about the basic physics there.
It's insane. A 12-year-old child does not have the upper body strength or the mass to alter the trajectory of a speeding iron cannonball with a wooden stick. It is physically impossible without shattering every bone in their arm, and they aren't allowed to use wands during the game.
And then, of course, we reach the most notoriously flawed mechanic of the entire, the golden snitch.
The snitch ruins the game. Catching it ends the match immediately and awards the Seekers team 150 points. In almost every realistic scenario, awarding a sudden 150 points guarantees a win for the team that catches.
Which renders the efforts of the other 12 players on the pitch, the chasers, the keepers, the beaters, largely irrelevant in a standard match. They are basically just performing halftime entertainment while the Seekers play the actual game.
But wait, here's where the theorists found a loophole in the league stand that is just brilliant. Because overall season standings, the way you win the Quidditch Cup, are based on total accumulated points across all your games, not just your win-loss record.
Ah, yeah, the potential for systemic collusion.
Exactly. Yeah. Let's say Slytherin and Hufflepuff are at the bottom of the league. They have both lost their first 2 games. They are mathematically eliminated from winning the championship if they play a normal, quick game.
Right.
But if the 2 captains secretly collude in the locker room before the match, they could mutually agree to completely ignore the snitch. They just tell their Seekers to hover at the top of the pitch out of the way. Then the Chasers just run the score up against each other. They play for 10 hours, racking up goal after goal until the score is 800 to 790. And then they catch the snitch.
By doing so, they artificially inflate their season point totals by hundreds of points, instantly leapfrogging the teams with better win-loss records who played honest, fast games. It is a massive structural flaw in the league rules that actively incentivizes cheating, point-fixing, and collusion.
It's hilarious to picture a shady, dark wizard bookie running illegal Quidditch betting rings based on point shaving in a high school sport.
It really is.
But beyond the funny sports loophole, the theorists point out something far more troubling about the everyday mechanics of this world, and it has to do with how the society handles labor.
Yes. When you strip away the whimsy, there is a strange, almost casual cruelty to wizarding labor practice. We see this most clearly illuminated by 2 specific characters, Argus Filch, the caretaker, and Rubeus Hagrid, the gamekeeper.
Let's look at Filch first. He is a squib, meaning he was born into a magical family but possesses no magical ability whatsoever. And his job is to clean a massive, muddy, heavily trafficked castle by hand with a mop and bucket.
He spends his days and nights scrubbing muddy footprints from miles of stone corridors, polishing armor without magic, and cleaning up magical messes he barely understands.
Which is objectively insane, because any random professor or even a capable second-year student could walk by, point their wand, say Skurgify or Evanesco, and the mud would instantly vanish. The magic to eliminate his backbreaking labor entirely exists, is commonly taught, and is incredibly easy to use.
And the same systemic issue applies to Hagrid. The text explicitly describes Hagrid dragging 12 massive, fully grown, snow-covered Christmas trees from the Forbidden Forest across the freezing grounds and into the Great Hall by every single year.
And as the sources brilliantly point out, there is literally a spell called Mobiliarbus. Hermione uses it in the 3 broomsticks to move a Christmas tree.
Yeah.
It is Latin for move tree. It is a spell designed specifically, intentionally, to levitate and transport trees effortlessly.
So we are forced to ask a critical sociological question. Why?
Right? Why?
Why does a society capable of instantly vanishing dirt and effortlessly levitating timber force its squib and half-giant citizens to perform grueling, unnecessary manual labor?
It feels distinctly punitive, like they're being punished for what they are.
It reveals a deeply ingrained systemic prejudice. The wizarding world, for all its wonder, relies on the physical exertion and subjugation of its marginalized class, those without magic or those of impure magical bloodlines like half-giants and house elves, to maintain the comfort and aesthetic of the magical elite. It's not just a plot hole. It's a reflection of the society's rigid internal hierarchy. Dumbledore could make Hagrid and Filch's jobs easier with a flick of his wand. The staff chooses not to fur them in their place.
That is so dark. But that friction between magical convenience and forced manual labor is such a perfect transition into the central paradox of Rubeus Hagrid, because Hagrid is a man who fundamentally does not fit the mold he's been placed in by this prejudiced society.
Not at all.
He is fiercely loyal to a system that which leads us to arguably the most controversial, mind-bending conclusion of this entire deep dive. We are talking about the ultimate question of his true Hogwarts house.
To set the definitive baseline here, both the author in interviews and the official Pottermore website explicitly state that Rubeus Hagrid was sorted.
Right. Gryffindor, the house of the brave, the loyal, the main character, the house of red and gold. But the analysis we are looking at violently rejects. The theorists argue, with a terrifying amount of textual, logistical, and psychological evidence, that the books absolutely prove Hagrid was actually a Slytherin. And I have to push back hard on this. Wait, Slytherin, the house of Dark Wizard, the house of Malfoy and Voldemort and pure blood supremacy. That feels so wrong on an emotional level. Hagrid embodies Gryffindor bravery. He literally went to Azkaban without complaining to protect the school.
I know, it sounds crazy at first.
Right. If he's a Slytherin, why does he openly cheer for Gryffindor in the Quidditch match?
Yeah.
And more importantly, he's the one who tells Harry in the very first book that there's not a single witch or wizard who went bad, who wasn't in Slytherin. Why would he aggressively trash his own house?
Those are the exact contradictions the theory addresses and resolves beautifully. Let's start by looking at the alternatives and systematically ruling them out based on what we actually observe of Hagrid's character in the text.
Okay, let's unpack this. Ravenclaw is out immediately. The house of wit, learning, and academic rigor. Hagrid is brilliant with magical creatures, yes, but it's practical, experiential, hands-on knowledge. He famously cannot spell the word Voldemort correctly. He lacks the theoretical academic rigor of a Ravenclaw.
Agreed. The most common alternative fans suggest is Hufflepuff. Hufflepuffs value hard work, loyalty, patience, and fairness. Hagrid is incredibly hardworking and fiercely, unconditionally loyal to Dumbledore.
But the analysis shoots down Hufflepuff using Hagrid's own dialogue. When Harry asks him about the different houses early on, Hagrid says, everyone says Hufflepuff are a lot of duffers.
Now consider human nature and the psychology of alumni pride. If you were proudly sorted into Hufflepuff and you lived your life governed by those values of loyalty and kindness, you would not casually repeat a derogatory slur about your own house to a new student without immediately defending it.
No way.
You wouldn't call your own community duffers without a massive caveat.
Right. You'd say people call us duffers, but we're actually the hard-working backbone of this school. Hagrid doesn't do that. He just dismisses. So we've eliminated Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff. The canon says Gryffindor. But the theorists point us to the events of 1943, the first time the Chamber of Secrets was opened, to prove it has to be Slytherin.
Let's analyze the physical logistics of the castle during that specific year. The chamber has been opened. Students are being petrified in the hallways. A student moaning Myrtle has just been found dead. What happens to the school's security protocol?
It goes on extreme high alert. It's a full lockdown. Teachers are actively patrolling the corridors all night. There are strict curfews. Students are escorted everywhere.
Keep that highly restricted environment in mind. Now remember what Hagrid is doing. He is secretly raising an acromantula, a giant, highly illegal, man-eating spider named Aragog, in a cupboard down in the dungeons.
And Hagrid is a 13-year-old half-giant. He is huge, taking up twice the space of a normal boy. He is famously clumsy. He walks heavily. He is not a ninja.
If Hagrid were a Gryffindor, his common room would be located high up in Gryffindor Tower on the 7th floor. To feed his spider, he would have to sneak out of the portrait hole, navigate 7 floors, creaking, moving staircases, dodge actively patrolling teachers, bypass Filch's predecessor, make it all the way down into the subterranean dungeons, feed the spider, and then make the entire perilous journey back up to the 7th floor.
Every night.
Every single night, without getting caught a single time.
In a school on high-security lockdown. Think about it. Harry has an invisibility cloak and the magical Marauders map showing everyone's location, and he still almost gets caught constantly sneaking around.
All the time.
There is zero chance a bumbling, massive 13-year-old is pulling off a mission. Impossible stealth operation across the entire length of the castle every single night. It breaks the suspension of disbelief entirely.
So what is the logistical alternative?
The Slytherin common room. Where is it located? It is literally down in the dungeon. If Hagrid is a Slytherin, he isn't traversing the entire castle. He isn't navigating 7 floors of security. He is just slipping out of his common room and walking a few doors down the dungeon hall. It is logistically infinitely more plausible.
But the physical logistics are only the foundation of the argument. The true, undeniable evidence lies in the interpersonal dynamics, specifically his relationship with Tom Riddle, the boy who would become Lord Voldemort.
This is the part that gave me absolute chills. When Tom Riddle finally confronts and frames Hagrid for opening the chamber, they have a tense standoff in the dungeon. And in that memory, they are on a casual first-name base. Tom calls him Hagrid, and Hagrid calls him Tom.
Consider the rigid social hierarchy of a high school, particularly an elite boarding school, magnified by the wizarding world's intense prejudice. In 1943, Tom Riddle is a 5th-year prefect. He is brilliant, handsome, incredibly charismatic, a favorite of the professor, and by all accounts, the most popular school.
He's the golden boy.
Right. He is also actively gathering his inner circle of dark wizard proto-death.
And Hagrid is a 3rd year. He is awkward, unpolished, unpopular, and a half-breed in a society that despises non-humans. Why on earth would the most popular, elite, pure-blood-obsessed 16-year-old in the school be casually hanging out in the dungeons, conversing with a 13-year-old outcast from a different house?
It doesn't make sense.
In normal high schools, 5th years don't even acknowledge 3rd years from their own house half the time, let alone a half-giant from Gryffindor.
Unless, of course, Hagrid was in his house. If Hagrid was a Slytherin, the entire dynamic. Remember Tom Riddle's specific recruitment strategy. He didn't just recruit brilliant, wealthy minds. He recruited muscle. He recruited large, impressionable, physically imposing boys who sought protection or a sense of belonging. He recruited Crabbe and Goyle's father. Later in his life, he heavily recruited the literal giant.
Oh my God. Hagrid is an oversized, incredibly lonely boy who just wants to fit in and loves monsters. He is the absolute perfect target for young sociopath's inner circle. Tom Riddle would look at this massive kid in his own house and think, I can use him. He's strong, he's loyal, and he's desperate for a friend. He brought Hagrid into the fold. He groomed him. He made him feel accepted in a house that otherwise would have shunned him.
Which makes the subsequent betrayal so much more devastating psychologically. When the school threatens to close because of the attacks, Tom Riddle doesn't just randomly point a finger at a nameless Gryffindor kid. He calculates. He sacrifices a vulnerable, trusting member of his own house to save skin. He uses Hagrid, perfect, expendable.
And that explains the quote. That fully explains why Hagrid tells Harry there's not a single witch or wizard who went bad who wasn't in Slytherin. It's not a generic prejudice he picked up from society. It is deeply, profoundly personal trauma.
Yes, exactly.
He is speaking from the pain of absolute life-ruining betrayal. His own prefect, the guy he thought was his friend, the guy who made him feel accepted in Slytherin House, stabbed him in the back, got him expelled, snapped his wand, and ruined his life. No wonder he hates Slytherin. He renounced the house entirely. He became a Gryffindor cheerleader because Gryffindor, embodied by Dumbledore, who gave him a job, saved him.
It recontextualizes his entire character arc. He goes from being a simple, jovial sidekick to a complex survivor of manipulation. And it answers another massive canonical. How does Hagrid know that Voldemort was Tom Riddle?
Right. This is a massive plot. Dumbledore explicitly states that very, very few people know that Tom Riddle, the handsome head boy, became the snake-faced Lord Voldemort. Most of the wizarding world thinks they are two completely different historical figures. Dumbledore knows because he's Dumbledore. But how does a gamekeeper who was expelled in his third year know the Dark Lord's greatest secret identity?
He knows because Tom Riddle personally told him. In the Chamber of Secrets, Tom reveals to Harry that he started using the new name Voldemort at Hogwarts, but only among his most intimate friends. His trusted inner circle in Slytherin.
Hagrid knows the name because he was in the room when Tom coined it. He was part of that Slytherin inner circle, however briefly, before the betrayal. It fits so perfectly, it's actually frightening.
And if we look to the very end of the series, to the apocalyptic Battle of Hogwarts, there is a chilling piece of behavioral evidence from the Death Eaters that definitively seals the theory.
During the final battle, Voldemort's forces breach the castle. The Death Eaters, the giants, the spiders, they're killing indiscriminately. They are slaughtering teachers, students, members of the Order of the Phoenix. They take absolutely no prisoners. It is a mass, except for one person.
They capture Rubeus Hagrid alive. They bind him and tie him to a tree in the Forbidden Forest to watch Voldemort kill Harry.
Why? Why spare the half-giant who has been actively fighting them for decades? Why not just hit him with a killing curse like they did to Lupin or Tonks?
Because they knew him.
Because he was an old classmate. Because to the senior Death Eaters, the old guard who were at school with Tom Riddle, Hagrid was a former Slytherin. He was one of them, once. Maybe they thought they could still bring him back into the fold now that the Giants had joined them, or maybe there was a twisted, nostalgic sense of alumni mercy. But taking him alive amidst a total slaughter makes zero sense unless there is a shared, intimate history.
It is a masterful reinterpretation of the text. It takes scattered inconsistencies, the location of his spider, his knowledge of Voldemort's name, his survival in the forest, and weaves them into a tragic, compelling backstory that makes Hagrid a significantly more complex character.
Absolutely.
He isn't just a cheerleader. He is someone who chose to align himself with the completely rejecting his dark past and the house that betrayed him.
It is brilliant. I will never look at Hagrid the same way again. And this perfectly leads us into the final section of our deep dive today, because Hagrid's house realignment shows how pulling just one tiny thread can unravel and completely reweave an entire character's history.
It's the butterfly effect of fan theories.
Totally. And the theories we're looking at today, this massive archive, they reveal a treasure trove of these pulled threads. It's a tapestry of tiny, brilliant deductions scattered across the lore. Let's really dig into some of the most fascinating discoveries, because each one of these could be an episode on its own.
Let's begin with the physical architecture of self, the theory of the Hogwarts dragon.
This is so fun, but also incredibly well supported. So the theory proposes that Hogwarts Castle is not just a building built of stone by normal magical masons. It suggests that the four founders actually transfigured a massive ancient dragon into the castle itself.
Specifically, a Hebridean black dragon.
Right. which is a species explicitly native to Scotland, where this school is located.
The textual support for this relied heavily on recurring motifs and the magic of the Founders era, which we know was vastly more powerful and primal than modern. What is the school's official, centuries-old motto?
Draco dormiens nunquam titilant, never tickle the sleeping dragon, which is a weirdly specific, almost threatening motto for a school of children, unless it is literal instructions for the structural integrity of the building. Don't use magic that might wake up the foundation.
And consider the architecture. The castle is described as constantly shift. Staircases move, rooms appear and disappear. It behaves more like a living organism than a static structure. And then there is the very first password Harry learns to access the Gryffindor common room in his first week.
Caput Dracona, Latin for head of the dragon. And where is the Gryffindor common room located? High up in a massive jutting tower. The literal head of the transfigured beast. And the Slytherin dungeons, cold and damp, would be down in the belly.
It's an absurd, colossal theory.
It is, but the contextual clues line up so neatly that you almost want it to be true. It makes the world feel infinitely more ancient.
It speaks to the reader's desire for the setting to be as magical and mysterious as the characters themselves. Moving on from the physical landscape to the magical artifacts, the research tackles one of the most famous items in the series, the ultimate invisibility.
Right, the third Deathly Hallow, the cloak passed down to Harry from his father, Jane. It is supposedly perfect, rendering the wearer completely invisible to all spells, charms, and physical detection. It's a legendary artifact. But there's a massive plot hole in the book. Certain characters, specifically Albus Dumbledore and Mad-Eye Moody with his magical whizzing eye, seem to be able to see right through it. They spot Harry multiple times when he's wearing it.
If the cloak is an absolute, infallible artifact of death, how is it bypassed by a simple magical eye or a headmaster's gaze? The theory solves this by looking at the material construction of the cloak. We know normal, everyday invisibility cloaks are woven from demiguise hair, which loses its opaque time.
Right.
But this is an ancient, mythical artifact created by the Peverell brothers. The theorists posit it is woven from the magic of
Thestral, the skeletal, leathery, winged horses that pull the carriages at Hogwarts. And what is the absolute defining magical rule of a Thestral?
You can only see them if you have witnessed death.
Boom. So the theory suggests that to see through the ultimate invisibility cloak, it's not about having a strong enough revealing spell or a fancy magical prosthetic eye. It's a metaphysical requirement tied to the fabric of the cloak itself. You can only see through the cloak if you have personally experienced death, meaning you have to have died and come back, or brushed so closely against the veil of death that your soul is marked by it.
It creates an exclusive, tragic club of characters. Dumbledore, who has been intimately surrounded by death his whole life and possibly fractured his soul. Moody, who has survived countless encounters. They have brushed so closely with the veil that the cloak's death-aligned magic no longer registers as a barrier. It is a profound, philosophical interpretation of the mechanics of death.
Okay, here is one of my absolute favorites because it solves a massive plot hole using the most mundane throwaway detail. I love when theories do this. Let's talk about Moaning Myrtle's diary, or, as it is formerly known, Tom Riddle's diary Horcrux.
The very first Horcrux we encounter in the series, chronologically and narratively.
Exactly. When Harry examines the diary in his second year, he notes that it is a completely ordinary, cheap Muggle diary. It has the name of a newsagent printed on the back. Vauxhall Road, London. This has always bothered hardcore fans. Think about Tom Riddle's psychology. He is a militant wizard supremacist. He hates muggles. He hates his muggle father. He views non-magical items as trash.
Right. It makes no sense.
Why on earth would the future Dark Lord go shopping for stationery at a muggle newsstand on Vauxhall Road to house his precious eternal soul?
It contradicts his entire ideology. A man obsessed with pure-blood lineage and magical artifacts like the Slytherin locket would never voluntarily purchase a Muggle notebook.
Complete. But the theory provides a dark, incredibly elegant, terrifying solution. It wasn't Tom Riddle's diary originally. It belonged to Moaning Myrtle.
Myrtle Warren, a Muggle-born student who was frequently bullied.
Exactly. A Muggle-born girl who grew up in the Muggle world, who was constantly crying and whiningly journaling all the time, and who would absolutely buy her school supplies, like a cheap diary, at a Muggle shop on Vauxhall Road before catching the train to Hogwarts.
So let's trace the timeline of the murder. Riddle commands the basilisk. The basilisk kills Myrtle in the bathroom. Riddle arrives on the scene shortly after.
He finds her body on the floor, and he finds the diary she dropped when she died. Now, Riddle needs to make a Horcrux right then and there. The murder has just fractured his soul, and he needs a vessel before the magic. He doesn't have a grand historical artifact on him in a girl's bath, so he opportunistically steals her diary. He turns the very possession of his Muggle-born victim into his first Horcrux.
It transforms a confusing logistical error, why a dark wizard shopped in Muggle London, into a chilling demonstration of cruelty and it fixed the psychological profile. He weaponized the mundane personal life of his victim, erasing her identity to house his own dark soul.
It is brilliant. It's my favorite kind of theory where a continuity error becomes deep character development. And finally, let's look at one more discovery. Neville Longbottom's true Patronus.
A Patronus being the corporeal, animal-shaped magic a wizard conjure tech driven by their powerful core.
Right. We learn almost everyone's Patronus in the series. Harry has the stag representing his father, Hermione has the otter, Ron has the Jack Russell Terrier. But despite being a main character who literally fights in the Department of Mystery, we never officially learn what animal Neville conjured.
The sources break this down by looking at the deep evolution of Neville's character. He begins as a timid, forgetful clump who feels entirely inadequate. He is constantly overshadowed by the legacy of his parents who are in St. Mungo's hospital, and he is intimidated by the imposing figures of Harry, Ron, and Hermione.
He is the boy with immense imposter. He's the boy who almost wasn't chosen.
But by the end of the narrative, Neville undergoes the most massive transformation of anyone in this. While Harry is off hunting Horcrux, Neville becomes the hardened leader of the resistance within Hogwarts. He stands up to Voldemort to his fate, bathed in fire, refusing to surrender.
And the crowning moment of his arc. When all hope seems lost, the sorting hat is placed on his head, and he pulls out the sword of Gryffindor. An act that the text explicitly states is something only a true Gryffindor can do.
So the theorists argue that his Patronus wouldn't be a toad, referencing his lost, pathetic pet Trevor. It wouldn't be a badger, referencing his quiet loyalty. It wouldn't reflect his timid beginnings at all, because a Patronus reflects your ultimate core identity.
His Patronus would be a lion, the symbol of Gryffindor House, because Neville Longbottom's entire journey is about growing into the ultimate unshakable embodiment of courage. While Harry is busy being the chosen one, burdened by a prophecy he didn't ask for, Neville chooses to be the hero. He has no prophecy protecting him. He fights anyway. He is the true lion of the story.
It is a fitting culmination for his character and a beautiful piece of thematic resonance that perfectly closes.
So what does this all mean? We've covered a staggering amount of ground. We've watched a traumatized, grieving Albus Dumbledore accidentally fracture his soul and house it in a phoenix, completely reframing his moral superiority.
We really have.
We've exposed the hilarious, point-shading flaws of a 3,000-person magical economy and their deeply prejudiced labor practice. We've completely rewritten the tragic, deeply misunderstood history of the beloved Rubeus Hagrid, proving his time in Slytherin and his grooming by Voldemort. And we've seen how a Muggle diary on Vauxhall Road reveals the dark opportunism of a young killer.
If we take a step back from the specific magical mechanic, the true value of this source material isn't just about finding mistakes. It's not about catching the author in a continuity error to feel superior.
No, not at all.
It's about the deep, almost instinctual human desire to collaborate with the art we love. When fans spend a decade building these intricate, deeply researched, heavily debated theories, they aren't destroying the world of the story. They are keeping it alive. They are expanding the borders of the map, filling in the blank spaces with logic, psychology, and passion, making the universe truly their own. It is an act of creation, not.
It is the ultimate expression of fan. You don't dissect something this thoroughly. You don't spend 10 years debating the logistics of an invisibility cloak unless you love the world. And it leaves me with a final lingering thought for you to ponder long after you dive. Early on, we talked about how Dumbledore's soul fragment survived inside Harry for years, resting quietly, purely sustained through a wand connection shared.
A dormant piece of history living entirely unnoticed.
Exactly. So if that is mechanically possible in this universe, if souls can splinter and latch onto the living through the thinnest threads of connection and shared experience, could there be other unrecognized soul fragments floating around? Think about all the ancient artifacts, the inherited wands, the old castles. Could fragments of ancient historical wizards currently be acting as invisible spirit guides for modern characters in the wizarding world?
Wow.
Fragments entirely unnoticed by the characters themselves, and perhaps even unnoticed by the authors who wrote them.
It forces you to ask, how much of our own intuition or the intuition of these characters when they make impossible choice is truly their own? And how much is the echo of history whispering in the back of the mind?
Because when you're looking at a universe this dense, the diagnostic scan will never give you a clean white line. You just have to learn to embrace and explore the muddy water.